member for Marco City you recognize.
Speaker, I'm delighted to rise to speak on behalf of the good people of the Marco City constituency on this bill. This bill is an amendment to a bill which was previously passed in this House in August of this year. At the time of the debate on that bill, the Grand Bahama Investments Incentives Bill, I could not have been here because I had an urgent matter that I had to attend to. So I'm glad that this bill is on the floor again as an amendment to the principal bill, because I can say a few things that I intended to say on the principal bill that are still relevant to this bill. I don't think it's any secret to anyone who's been listening to anything I've said since I've been in this House and even before I came in this House that I would never have supported that principal bill. And so I don't think it'll take anyone by surprise that I do not support this bill. And I want to spend some time on saying why, Mr. Speaker. I suppose I'll start by saying this. I'm always flabbergasted when the member for Pine Ridge gets up in this place and says how well things are going in Grand Bahama. Because I can only assume that means things are going well for him and people close to him, because to say that things are going well in Grand Bahama is shocking to me. And to say that things were going well in Grand Bahama before Hurricane Matthew, is equally shocking. I've said some other things concerning business involvements in Grand Bahama. I don't intend to go back to those things. I intend merely to stick to the substance of this bill, because I don't want to make this a theatric experience. This is far too important to deal with the substance of this bill than to get distracted with ancillary issues. You know, Mr. Speaker, the closer and closer we get to the end of this calendar year and to, thankfully, another election to give the people of this country another opportunity to decide how they want to structure the way forward in this House. The closer we get to that date, the more I am driven back to so much scripture on this country. And you know, when we were doing the referendum, Mr. Speaker, well, when I say we, when I was out there on the campaign trail as a sole member of this House, trying to educate the people of this country on another side of the referendum. And as I was joined by members of the church, thankfully, and other members of civil society, I made the statement, and I will repeat this statement. I'm sorry? Oh, and with the honorable member, sorry, for Bamboo Town in respect of Bill number 4. I said something on the and I apologize for that. I said something on the campaign trail that I want to repeat as often as I can. And it was a simple scripture. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. For it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone that believes. I mean, that might not seem relevant to this House. But we are a country that was built on a foundation of adherence to godly principles and values. And sometimes we see those as highfalutin things. We see those as things we speak about and don't act out. But the most fundamental principle is that we ought to be our neighbor's keeper, that we ought to do good to others, that we ought to use all the talents and opportunities that we have to advance the interests of our country and our brothers and sisters as we advance the interests of our God. And I'm reminded, as I think on things like that, of what the prophet Habakkuk said. He said, declare the vision and make it plain. Inscribe it in stone, that those who receive it may run with it. In today's language, stop playing around. Make it very clear what you believe. Make it very clear what you propose. Make it very clear that you have a vision. Put it in permanent form so that people can understand it, with the assurance that when you do that, who receive it will run with it. I'm intentionally spending a few minutes on my time on building this foundation, because I believe this is the foundation this country was built on, and this is the foundation this country will be rebuilt on. We're taught as we're growing up of the proverb that righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach to all people. We seem to forget this. We seem to believe we're talking about some personal thing. Right standingness will build your nation up, and wrong standingness will break it down. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, will turn from seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear their prayers, I will forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. I am not ashamed of the gospel, and I am not ashamed of this faith that I have and this assurance that I have that we are not in here to play games with the opportunity that we have been presented in here to have. We are in here to do the work of the people, which is ultimately the work of God. I want to make it very, very clear, because there's a dividing line, not only in this house, but in this country. And at the end of the day, we could be in here to try and advance our own little agendas and get in the headlines and say scandalous things back and forth. Or we could be in here to do the business of the people and advance the interests of our country. So why is Grand Bahama important to this question? And I want the people of our commonwealth, our common weal, W-E-A-L, our common bindingness, to understand that Grand Bahama is integral to the success of the Bahamas as a whole, and the failure of Grand Bahama will be the failure of our commonwealth. This is why this bill is so, the act that we passed and the bill we're presently debating are so important. I mean, to put it in simple terms, we have somewhere, used to be 60,000 people we said were in Grand Bahama, but with the massive depopulation that's taken place over the last 10 years in Grand Bahama, because of the adverse economic conditions in Grand Bahama, and the sleeping at the wheel of those who could have made a difference, has probably brought that number down significantly. I know just kind of observationally in Grand Bahama, you don't see the people you used to see. You don't see the cars you used to see. You see empty homes and empty businesses all over the place. And so you know there's something that's happened there. And nonetheless, Grand Bahama creeps on. But if Grand Bahama were to fail as an economic entity, I'm not talking about Grand Bahama continuing to hop on like our islands in the central and southern Bahamas, where there are a couple people there, and so we keep the name of an island, but there's no economic activity, and there's no future. If Grand Bahama were to descend into that state, New Providence will pay the price for it. Because we will not go quietly into the night. We will go somewhere. And this island cannot afford that injection of population. It cannot afford it. It cannot sustain it. There are barely enough jobs right now for the people who are here. Remember the old saying, if you are missing, you're either in Freeport or you're in jail? And that was said because Grand Bahama was an economic engine. And when people went missing in Nassau, you could rest assured they went to find a job in Grand Bahama. It is not so now. What's happening in Grand Bahama right now is, notwithstanding what the member for Pine Ridge will say, what's happening in Grand Bahama is this. We have had 3 of the integral parts of our island shut down. We hope they will reopen. They've been shut down for a month. That's the container port, the airport, and the hotels that together fall under the Hutchison brand. Major employment. But also the entrance and exits to our island. Had that happened in New Providence, with the greatest respect, that would have been seen as a national crisis, and we would have sorted that out in a matter of days. But we have Grand Bahama suffering through that for months. And I happen to wish the minister, as he's being titled now, with responsibility for restoration, every favor in doing his job and doing it effectively to bring relief to the people. Let's not politicize that. But there remains a serious concern. I will parenthetically just insert a thought here, since I'm on to those 3 crucial activities in Grand Bahama. There are those who will say, you know, it's xenophobic to talk about the Chinese in a negative sense. And they will try to amalgamate a critique, even objective criticisms of the Chinese entities as being a xenophobic attack on the Chinese people. I don't participate in that. God made us all in his own image. I don't think any people are better or any people are worse than anyone else. When I speak about the Chinese in an adverse sense, I'm talking about communist China. I'm not talking about Chinese nationals. I have no problem with Chinese nationals. I always say, and I've said a couple times in the House, it's impossible to paint a portrait with one color. Try it. It's impossible to paint a portrait with one color. By definition, it has to be a tapestry. By definition, you need to use all the colors in the brush that God has created. And all people have value and have to be looked upon in that way. But that does not mean that you overlook the adverse things. And when I speak about my concerns and my fears about China, I'm talking about communist China. I'm reminding this House, that is the country that went into Tiananmen Square and ran a tank over protesters. That's the country that's sitting in the South China Sea right now, threatening Japan and the Philippines, and saying openly to its generals, prepare for war.
Isn't Trump saying?
You can take tangents, or we can take responsibility. We are divinely positioned where we are in this world, you know. We sit at the crossroads of everything, and we always have. And no one else fails to notice that. But I must rush on, Mr. Speaker, because I do want to get to the point of this. Let's deal with Grand Bahama. We're being asked in this House right now to approve a bill to extend tax exemption to 17 companies in addition to the 4 that we already extended it to. People will say, oh, the bill is here also because the bill will expire in terms of applications. I hear that. But when you really read the bill, it's 6 months from the date of commencement of the bill, which is 6 months from 26 August 2016. They will say 6 months from the date of the deemed commencement of the bill. But that's not what it says. So let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. We're talking about being here to extend a tax benefit to 17 additional companies, in addition to the Port Authority, the Development Company, the Harbor Company, and the Freeport Commercial Industrial. 17 additional companies. What did that bill do when we passed that? I've said this in here many times. That bill, not on my word, but on all the reports that the government obtained, gave $100 million per year tax exemption to those companies. Not $100 million over the life of the act, you know. $100 million per year, assuming no increase in market value for the land over the next 20 years. That's what that bill did. At the same time, where if we need to meet the urgencies of a hurricane to raise another $120 million, we need to borrow because we don't have it. So the country that does not have the money to meet its exigencies going forward is happily giving away $2 billion over a 20-year period at $100 million minimum per year. And now we're being told, listen, just to make it clear, we're not only doing that for these 4 companies. We have 17 more that we want to expressly include in that list. People will say, oh, they were implicitly included. Fine. You now want to expressly include them. And the principle is you want to further crystallize this concept of giving away this $100 million a year. Why is that important? One, because we can't afford to give away $100 million a year. Look over, Mr. Speaker, the last 20 years in this country. And I say this for the purpose of leveling the field on our thoughts and our discussions in this place. Just take 1997 going up to 2017. 10 years over there in the PLP, 10 years over here in the FNM. What difference did it make to Grand Bahama? What cash was put in Grand Bahama? I'm not talking about salaries. What capital developments did the government fund? What small and medium enterprises did the government support? What did we do to improve the lives in Grand Bahama? How can we, as a country, sit and see our second capital falling into decline, our second city falling into decline, and do nothing? And now we're being asked to further reinforce not only not doing anything, but giving the same people a $100 million tax break per year. I mean, how can that make any sense? I don't think that makes any sense. There's something fundamentally wrong with the Grand Bahama model. See here, Mr. Speaker? This is the Nassau Guardian. Nassau Guardian. This is the Nassau Guardian, right there. Saturday, 21st September, 1968. Nassau Guardian. Headline, Port Authority sale is approved, but government gets sweeping concessions. Both sides agree to broad changes. That's the subline. 1968. This followed upon the enactment of the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement in 1955. And by 1968, if you're following the history and chronology, in 1967, the PLP was elected, the first black government, first majority government in this country, and the investors in the Port Authority were concerned about that. 1 year later, they came and said, let us take our shares out of this country, please, because the Port Authority is just a local Bahamian company. And the government of the day, headed by Sir Lyndon, agreed, but only after we would get back sweeping concessions, including that the Port Authority would not issue licenses otherwise and with approval of the government. We've had that for all these years, 48 years. Still in place. There's actually a Royal Commission report on it. I'm not there yet, I'm getting there. There's still a Royal Commission report on it. This is the company we're negotiating with whom we already negotiated 48 years ago, and from whom we already got the concessions, and with whom we never enforced the concessions. And the whole idea of this act that was passed is to give them more concessions to do what they were already obligated to do, and which we had the power to direct them to do, and still do. As a part of this, we got 7.5% of the shares of the Port Authority in 1968. I sit in this house before, and I asked, where are the shares? The member for West End and Bimini and the member for Pine Ridge said, we will show you where they went. I've been waiting. No shares yet. But it begs this question. Because when you go and you check the register, anyway, it begs this question. Where are dividends since 1968 on those shares? Where are dividends on the sale of the power company and the telephone company and the water company and sanitation services and all of these things, which were assets in that company? Where are dividends? And where's our right that we had from here and that we gave away $100 million to get again to put directors on these boards? Where? That was agreed from 1968. And this is nothing that's new. I've been saying this for 4.5 years. And the Royal Commission has been saying this since 1972. But we come to this house, we do these things that make absolutely no sense, and our people become more impoverished. You know a simple test to me, Mr. Speaker? This is the test of governance to me. What did you do to make someone's lives better? This used to be the PLP test, you know. Wipe every tear from every eye, remember that? Test gone. Simply stated, what happened over the last how many ever years you were in to improve the lives of ordinary people? I've been sitting in this house, standing in this house, speaking in this house for 4.5 years about something as simple as legal reform to protect homes from foreclosure. Nothing, nothing, nothing. About to go in another election, nothing. Let me bring this into a capsule. When you think of Freeport, the city of Freeport, and by extension the island of Grand Bahama, recognize this. You're thinking and speaking about the last colony in an independent Bahamas. You're speaking about a country that has within it a city of its own population that's governed by a foreign entity, like a little company, in an independent commonwealth. And what do we do? Do we start to take it apart? We say, no, give them $100,000 more every year. Where's the capital injection into Grand Bahama over the last 4 years? Where is it? We know that the largest employer in Grand Bahama, as in every city, is not the government, and it's not any one enterprise. It's the small and medium enterprises. It's the middle class. My business and a couple other little small businesses put together is a bigger employer than Hutchison, and a bigger employer than the government. But what do we do to stimulate those businesses? When the hurricane passed, did they close down? No. We saw this in 2004, 2005, and again in 2016. The minute we have any natural disaster, the larger companies close down. because they are not intimately connected with their employees. My employees, I know personally. Am I going to close my business because I'm not getting an income? No. I'm going to say, I know him, I know her. They have mortgages to pay. Their children go to that school. They need to eat. So I'm going to keep that business open. And a responsible government supports the middle class. I've called in this House over and repeatedly for income taxes. I've pointed out that income taxes only benefit the rich people in this country, including most people in this House. I've pointed out that it is a tool, a structural tool, that would allow us to bring relief when we have to. Had we had income tax in place, this is a time when you say as a government, we're relieving the tax burden through income tax on these particular employers in Grand Bahama so that they can keep their employees going. That's what income tax, one of the things, is for. To my mind, the most important thing it's for is to see what corrupt politicians are doing, to see where their money comes from, to hear nothing else about bags and closets and so on, and to be able to say, if you didn't declare it, I'm putting you in jail for that. But somehow we're not there. Speak about Grand Bahama. I have 9 minutes and some left, so let me just get to that. For those who want to convince our people that there's no hope, there's nothing better, it's all the same stuff, let's go further. Let's not just critique what's going on or what has not been done. Let's talk about what they call blue skying. Let's look to the future. Let's do what Abaka says. Declare the vision and make it plain. Inscribe it in stone so that people know what they're going to follow. Let's show that there's a better future. Take something as simple as this, Mr. Speaker. Something as simple as this. In Grand Bahama, you have a highway that comes from the harbor and comes through the parallel through a part of the heart of the city, heading into Lucaya. That highway passes one of the oldest, most picturesque centers of commerce called the International Bazaar. The Port Authority happened to build an alternative center called Port Lucaya. And lo and behold, decided to close the highway passing the International Bazaar. And surprisingly, and of course I'm being cynical, some years later, the economy of the International Bazaar was ruined.
Collapse.
Because no one passes it. The buses go around it, past the circle, head down to Port Lucaya, which coincidentally and happily was owned by the Port Authority, and so they benefited. What is wrong with the responsible government opening the road? Oh, that's the Port Authority's thing. No, it isn't. Go back to the Bengay Agreement. Port can't close any roads without the approval of the government. Go to the Acquisition of Lands Act, which we passed in this House from the 70s. The government could acquire land any place in this country for public purposes. A road is a public purpose. Just acquire the land, open back the road. From that time.
Even challenge it.
But you know what this reminds me of? I don't understand this point anymore. Because it doesn't favor their interests right now. That is an artery for the city of Freeport. The bazaar is privately owned. Not by the Port Authority, privately owned.
By the union.
After the Port Authority had owned it and sold it out, they closed the road.
No, the union.
Our straw vendors, we bleed and cry all over the place how we do. Those poor straw vendors being treated so poorly in Port Lucaya, when there's a massive area for the straw vendors in the bazaar. When are we going to realize that the bazaar is a city within a city? It is like someone coming and gifting us with a miniature New Orleans right in the heart of Freeport. Just go and repair the thing. Put Bahamians to work. Acquire it as a government. We have the Acquisition of Lands Act that allows us to acquire it overnight and pay for it later if we can't agree the figure. Suddenly our people have work. What's wrong with it? And this is not a new thought. This is a thought that's been expressed by me for years. Mr. Speaker, what's wrong for us to finally realize? The same thing I'm saying about the bazaar is the same thought about West End. West End is the closest seaport to Florida. It is the natural destination for all the yachts coming in. It used to be the destination for all the yachts until the Port Authority built Port Lucaya and put their yacht base in there. And all of a sudden, all the business goes to Port Authority, As a government, we still own the Crown land in West End. What's wrong with building the harbors that need to be there? You know, Mr. Speaker, you remember playing jacks? Well, you may not. But, you know, the ball goes up and you grab these metal things. Remember the shape of those metal things, the little spindles coming off? That is the design that the U.S. Corps of Engineers realized works for artificial reefs. It's a steel form covered with concrete, dropped in the water, and they interconnect. We're talking about water coming into West End every year. Put the reef. It happens to secure the island, the settlement. It happens to put our people to work. It happens to use indigenous Bahamians. But it doesn't happen to get a cut for the politicians. Listen, I'm telling you right now, unless God pushes me in another direction, this next election is about corruption. Right now, plain and simple. Because our people cannot take it anymore. We are watching the impoverishment of our people. These are the same people we grew up with, same people we used to do things with. We went one path, they went the other. We're benefiting, and the whole country is suffering. This can't be right. Let me finish in my last 4 minutes. Just blue skying, Mr. Speaker, you know. Why not talk some more, eh? The city of Freeport worked, not by some mystery, you know. And not because white people owned it or did something with it. It worked because we made it a fun city. A low-cost, fun city. Not the high-end, high rollers. The massive number of low-end tourists. That's what Freeport worked for. We are still exactly where we were. The population of Florida and the southeastern seaboard is greater than it was before. Our market is still there. But our product is not there. What is wrong, for instance, with saying that we're going to bring a flotilla? This is something I negotiated when I was president of the Grand Bahama Chamber of Commerce. Bringing a flotilla across from Florida into Freeport every weekend. You have your private boat? Fine. When you get off work at 4 o'clock, we put Bahamian pre-clearance in the U.S., just like the U.S. has pre-clearance here. We put customs and immigration officers in the U.S. You come through our entry port, you go into your boat, you're already checked in, you're already checked out. By the time you hit the Bahamas, no more paperwork. You start having a party from Florida. We have jobs for our captains to be able to go because they will need a work permit to carry those boats over. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with fun? Fun makes money. My last 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker, I just want to talk on this very briefly because I hear people floating around these little ideas that are poorly thought out. We're talking about a lottery in the Bahamas. I actually agree with the lottery. But I don't agree with a lottery in the Bahamas, for the Bahamas. It's too small. We are the only country in this region that can sell a lottery to our neighbors. You know the population of Cuba is 11.3 million. You know the population of Haiti is the same figure, coincidentally. Population of Jamaica is about 2.7 million. We're talking about a population of about 25 million people in this region that we can sell a lottery ticket to. We already have the immigration law that says if you invest over $750,000 now, you get permanent residency in our country. You know what that would do to the rest of the Caribbean? If we say that we are selling our lottery tickets and those who benefit when they invest in the Bahamas can get permanent residency, this, with the greatest respect, is what's wrong with our country. This is the same thing that happened when white people come or Columbus come to take over. Everything is a joke. This is only a joke if you're going to bed with food in your stomach, or if you have a roof over your head, or if your children are cared for. Otherwise, this is not a joke. This is serious. We are talking about watching the decline of our country over the next couple of years. We are now at 73.6% of GDP before this recent borrowing. Our national debt. The red line is 60%. And our answer to everything is not to reform our tax system, not to bring in proper anti-corruption law, not to deal with freedom of information, not to deal with proper procurement so we know that we get the money for value. Our answer is to just borrow more money. I'm telling you, the people are frustrated with this, and that is not a political statement. That's a nationalistic statement. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. Marco City will not support this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.